So let's start. We're going to talk about .NET MAUI. That's well, MAUI is the new toolkit that Microsoft released as part of .NET that enables developers to write code once for the UI and deploy it on all the platforms available that you can deploy on mobile and desktop. So we're going to talk about that. How we got here? Well, I remember when I started learning .NET around 2005 or something like that. Microsoft gave a promise with .NET that it was to somehow you could write your application and it could be executed anywhere. Sadly, they only provided the runtime for Windows, so there was nothing at all for that time. But then came Mono. You remember probably hearing about Miguel de Icaza. He was one of the community members that started investing on that. Basically, what he did was to take the open specification. Okay, just muted that. Basically, what he did was to grab the open specification and created the Mono environment or the runtime that was used mostly by the Linux communities, and so everyone could run the .NET code on Linux and all that. And then after that, he and some other guys founded what is Xamarin. With Xamarin, they started creating this framework so it could be executed on mobile devices like iOS or Android. But with that, you had to create one project per device, and each project had its own UI. So after that, they created Xamarin Forms that condensed all the UI into a single project. But anyway, you needed to have the runtimes or your projects for each target device. So you had one Xamarin Forms for all the devices, but you need to have one project for each device. And then, well, Microsoft took everything somehow around 2016 or something like that. They bought Xamarin, and it was part of the Microsoft community. But now they took Xamarin Forms, took Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android, everything, and integrated that into .NET. So that's how we get into .NET MAUI. What is .NET MAUI? It's a multi-platform. Well, actually, MAUI stands for Multi-Platform Application UI. Basically, it's part of .NET 6, but the code is compiled for each of the devices. For example, for iOS, everything is compiled ahead of time into RM code, so you have your application deployed and it's already native on iOS. For Android, it's compiled just in time, so that means that when you create the application, it will be compiled. Mac OS it's using just a wrapper of Mac Catalyst that will enable to use what was created for iOS and execute that into a Mac computer. And for Windows, they're using WinUI 3. It's an open source, as .NET 6 is. So there's a lot of people contributing into that. There is a lot of tools created by the community. There's a pretty cool community toolkit for MVVM. I'm going to talk about that later. This can be run on Android, iOS, macOS, Windows, and everything is in a single project. What does it mean? That you only have one project, and .NET MAUI will, for example, if you have your images and resources and all that stuff, .NET MAUI will compile that depending on the target device. So you don't need to give a specific images formats or stuff for each of the devices. You just need to provide your your resources and everything else will be handled by MAUI. So how does this work? Well, it starts with your application code. You write your application code using C#. You use the .NET MAUI class library. This .NET MAUI is on over .NET for Android. It's a wrapper for .NET for iOS, Mac, .NET for Android, .NET for Mac. .NET, these tools were well carried, some are in Android, some are in iOS, but now they are merged into MAUI and were converted or renamed to .NET for the platform and UI 3. And everything else, well, also your code will use the .NET 6 base class library. So you can use stuff like the HTTP client to make requests. You can use file streams and everything that you are using as a .NET developer can be used for this. Just .NET MAUI provides you a wrapper for all the specific devices. Like, for example, the networking, you will just need to call an interface and MAUI will just handle it if you are targeting into for a sorry, there was a question or something? I hear something on the microphone. So you have your base library and everything will be executed over the mono runtime or Win32, the Windows .NET runtime. For mono runtime, we have Android, iOS, and macOS, and for Win32, it's Windows. This application or MAUI allows to have cross-platform APIs. So, for example, the communications, you just need to call the interface for contacts or email or networking, and .NET MAUI will provide the implementation based on the target device that you are executing your application on. So there's no need to fiddle with that. I'm going to list some of those APIs. We have the communications, the device features like battery, sensors, geolocation, and all that stuff. For media, we can take screenshots for particular text-to-speech, and everything will run native on the device, even if you only have a wrapper for that. Also, there's APIs for sharing, like the clipboard files and text. You can pick files from your device or use even the secure storage. For example, in iOS, you can use the keychain to store password or sensitive data, and it will be run native on your iPhone, yeah, or your iOS device. And some other application models like application actions, like the ones that on your cell phone, when you click on the icon, you can see some other options to execute the application. Those are the actions. You can call a browser, open the maps, provide or deny permissions, or ask for permissions. Actually, we cannot, as developers, force a permission to be provided. We need the user to provide that, but we can use the permissions to verify that the user has this request prompt at the screen. And well, let's talk about the UI. Everything is done on XAML, that is Extensible Application Markup Languages. This is basically what we had for WPF, making Windows applications, and also use it for Silverlight back in that time. This means that we can have our UI in just markup language and have everything like event handlers and all the code behind. XAML also provides some data binding. This allows us to implement the MVVM pattern. I'm going to talk about that next. There is no visual designer, sadly. So everything will be used XAML, but there is the hot reload feature that was provided for .NET 5 and above, will provide us to, or will allow us to have the emulator for the phone and the code on the code on Visual Studio. So when you make a change in Visual Studio, it will be how it's reloaded into the emulators, and that works like it's like having a visual designer, but not on Visual Studio. And well, the most important thing here is that you don't require to use XAML. You can use code, use C# code, like if you remember probably working with .NET, Visual Studio .NET 2005 or something, when you created your UI applications, or even in Visual Basic, there was a visual designer, but everything was done with C# code. So this will be also used for MAUI. And then let's talk about the MVVM pattern. It's just a model view model. This means that we have our model that is our data, our view that will be our XAML page, and our view model that will be providing the data using data binding, and also handling all the commands and everything, and going to the model and retrieve data, data and everything. With this, we use the view model as the binding context in XAML. And XAML, you need to implement, sorry, on the code behind you, on your view model, you will need to implement your iNotify property change. But here's one cool stuff that the community provided. It's called the Community Toolkit MVVM. So with that community toolkit, this example is what we needed to do manually. You need to implement the iNotify property change and create your properties and get the variability or the base and implement the property change notify and all that stuff. But with the Community Toolkit MVVM, there is some source generators for this. So we can go from all this code and everything that you need to write in just a couple of attributes. So there will be a source generated or observable object that you need to implement in your view model. This will provide the observable property. Actually, when you mark your fields like an observable property, the field will be generated, the property will be source generated, and you can also create or mark your fields to implement the notify property change for. So in this case, we have our SBC and our title fields marked as observable properties, and you can see that the SBC is already implemented. This was done on the source generator. It's pretty cool. You saves a lot of time writing just bootstrapping code and all that stuff. So also MAUI provides some pages. Those are this is for structuring your UI. There are content pages, flyout pages, navigator page, and tablet page. So on your iPhone, probably you already saw some applications that the flyout is the menu that you just swipe to the left or to the right and will be appear there. Or if you click on a button, you will have navigation pages with the go back button on the top, or the tablet page that will have some tabs on the footer or on the header. So this is already provided, so you can structure your application in a more efficient way. Each page, for example, the content page, only allows one specific visual element. So in order to create more user-friendly page, for example, for the content, if you create a button, it will only be just one giant button there. So instead of that, you can implement some layouts. So we have the absolute, the bindable layouts, flex layouts, grids, horizontal stack and vertical layouts. These layouts will help us to structure or place our commands or objects in a more pretty way. And well, the next thing will be the controls. There are a lot of controls for .NET MAUI. We have stuff like laser view, web view, radio buttons, image buttons, switch, swipe. All of these controls will be inside a layout and your layout on your page, and then you can move from page to page. But for that, they provide us with something that it's called a shell that was created for setting forms and was just carried with everything when they did the upgrade to .NET MAUI. So with the shell, we have one single place to describe everything, all the visual hierarchy of an application. So you have several pages or menus or stuff like that. We have common, or shell provides common navigation user experience. You just need to write on code that you are navigating to a page like if you are using your command line. If you need to go back, you just need to navigate to ... or stuff like that. Or if you need to move to another one, you need to go back and display everything. You can just use URI basic navigation, provides an integrated search handler. And well, that's all the technical stuff that I wanted to tell you before we dive into a demonstration. Sadly, I wanted to have this application running on my phone, but for that you need to, well, it's an iPhone, so you need to be part of the Apple developers community or Apple developer program, and that costs a lot of money. And actually, I just need to buy diapers and all that stuff. So there will be no hands-on physically demonstration, but yeah, I can show you. Yeah, and there's no budget, and there's a meme for that. So let's go to Visual Studio. I'm using Visual Studio for Mac. I think you are not seeing my screen. Oh yeah, you see my screen. Can you see this Visual Studio for Mac prompt?
Yeah.
No. Okay. So I already have this application created. Actually, let me try this here. So let's start with the folder structure for that .NET MAUI. Just let me know if you can see it or if I need to make. Can you see it? I mean, is the font size good, or do I need to?
It's a good size, I think.
Okay, well, for the folder structure, so our dependencies are like our NuGet dependencies. So we can add or manage NuGet packages. So for example, here I installed the system.NET JSON and the community toolkit MVVM. So it's so far we are used to do this. Yeah, we will have dependencies for each of the target devices. So for this, I only have Android, iOS, and Mac OS, Mac Catalyst. We have our model. This model is just my class reference. I'm with this application, I'm pulling some data from the Slack API. So this matches the response. So nothing new about this. And this platforms folder, it's the one that contains all the available platforms we can deploy to. And if I need to do specific resources for Android, for example, I will need to add them here. Or for iOS, if I need to create something or enable something, I just need to set up the info list and all that stuff. But so far for this demonstration, I'm not using any specific platform code. So actually, well, one of the things I forgot to mention is you need to, if you want to test .NET in Visual Studio, you will need to download the 2022 preview. It's not the release or production ready Visual Studio. So there will be some issues with this, but besides that, then you can just test .NET MAUI. Well, some properties just for the launch. Here is our resource. Yep.
If you wanted to make a demo on an Android, do you need something special, like on the Apple developer?
No. Visual Studio will provide you some simulators. So here I can execute my application on my Mac or on an iOS simulator or on an Android emulator, an Android device. So with Visual Studio, you can test on simulators, and then when everything is looking good, you can deploy to this specific app store.
Thank you.
Okay. There is a question in the chat. Did Microsoft really meet the single code base promise, or do you need additional elements for every platform? Mostly, it's fulfill it only for Mac. If you are developing on Windows machine, you will need to have a Mac machine in order to being able to deploy into a Macintosh environment, or running an emulator for an iPhone. So besides of that, you can just write your application and test for Windows and on an Android, and that will work fine on your Windows development machine. But that's all that you need to have. There's no specific requirements to test or deploy or debug or write your code or to develop your application. Okay, well, I'm going to continue with these resources. We have here the application icon. It's just a bunch of SVG that sadly Visual Studio for Mac preview doesn't display, only the SVG code, not displays the image. Yeah, that cannot stop us. I can just with Safari. It's just blue rectangle. For example, okay, no, I didn't want to do that. This other one is the Simpat logo. We can have our fonts here. We need to use specific fonts. We just drop them here, and I will show you later where this is referenced. Images, if we need to play with images or include images in our application, we will put them here on this folder. By default, there is this .NET bot saying hi. The raw folder is, for example, if you need to have raw files like JSON app configure or app settings file, or if you need to pull some data or something like that, it will be from this raw, it will be deployed as an embedded resource. And the splash is the image that will be executed when you launch your application in your device. So the next folder is the services. It's just a Slack service. You should not see this. I'm gonna need to change that token. But yeah, basically we are connecting to the Slack API, grabbing the users list, and use filtering. We only need to use the Simpat tech emails to display the users. For the views, we have two main views. The main page that will display our list of users that basically is using a view model binding context. You can see here that is dependency injected, or is a dependency injection, or using dependency inversion pattern. So yeah, we have the services available for .NET MAUI. For the details, it's the same. We have our view model and all the XAML code used to display the details for a user. And here we have a collection view that will display all the users, and we have a template for each of those users. We will display the image, profile image, the real name, the profile, and all that stuff. But this is provided by the view model. We have here our base view models, as I mentioned to you. We are using this observable object source-generated code. Basically, what we are doing here is creating the source generator will create our properties. Okay, let me open the chat. Is this Microsoft response to Flutter? No, I think it's just the next is a continuation of Xamarin Forms, or the evolution of Xamarin Forms. Is not trying to, I don't think that they are trying to come, probably not at the moment, probably in a future, I don't know. But this is just a continuation or an evolution of .NET MAUI, sorry, of Xamarin Forms. Okay, so for, we have our base model. You can see here, we have, for example, this is BC, is part of our base view model, but was source generated. You know, for using a source generator, you need to mark this as partial. And if I try to go to the implementation on this, yeah, well, Visual Studio for Mac doesn't allow access so far, probably in the future. But with Visual Studio for Windows, you can just go to the dependencies folder, and you can see there on the analyzers how the source generated code. This means that everything is generated before executing the application, so will be compiled with everything else. Is not creating on the fly when you are executing your application. We have our user details view model that only has our user observable property, and this will be set up using this query property. What we are indicating here is to request for this user parameter when we are navigating into this view. So I'm going to show you here that after, or on this user's view model, under our user's view model, you can see here we're using the title. If I try to go to the implementation, it will not work because it was source generated. It's not on the code here. A couple of commands. Go to details with this. This will be used to navigate to the user's detail. And I'm using this query, the user query, and just sending the user that will be provided by the binding. I just want to show you the binding. And get users async, that this is binded to a button. When you click the button, it basically will just go to the Slack service, get the users, and update the model. This users is an observable collection, and it will just bind everything with the view. Yeah, for those controls, we have here this button. You can see here the command is get user command is binded, and will be enabled if the application or if the service is not busy. If it's busy, will be disabled. And we have this gesture, the tap gesture recognizer. What we are doing here is to send the parameter will be our user, because we are creating a template for all the users, but for each user we have this parameter. So we're binding to dot. Dot means that on this context, the user or the element that is executed or is being mapped into the template. And then we need to use the command from the ancestor. The ancestor will be the user view model. So we are using our view model, and our view model will display all of users. And for this, we're telling XAML to use the command from the view model, but send the parameter, send the user as a parameter. Hopefully you understand that. So, well, after that, I'm going to show you this MAUI program. It's we have this MAUI app create builder. We can use configure some fonts, services. Here is everything for dependency injection. We are telling the service to be a singleton and the users and the main page to be a singleton, because that will be every time. We don't need to instantiate more than one. But for the user's view model, user detail view model and the detail page, will be better to create a new instance every time we request for a different user, and just leave the garbage collector to do its magic. And well, we are telling him here to use the MAUI app, this app XAML. On the XAML side, we have a bunch of resource or a resource dictionary, basically defining some primary colors. It's like similar to a CSS file. We are just providing some keys or colors or styles for our elements. So for example, here we have the button. This button will be is used. This button outline or the card view are used on our main page. For example, we have this this style. We are telling this button or outline for the frame. We have the card view and all stuff. How do we handle the diverse screen room for every target device? Do we create a layout version for every one of them? No. I'm going to show you once I execute this application. But you can, on XAML, you will need to provide several tags. For example, if you need to display a specific resource for Android, you will need to handle that manually. Or if you need to display a label, for example, for the iPhones, there is a specific label, hate or something like that. You will need to put that on your XAML page or your XAML file, but besides that, there is not, everything else will be handled by your device screen size. Probably you just need to configure that everything on your same view. So if you need something specific, then you will need to provide to or create the implementation for that, and then use that based on the device. Okay, I was on the application XAML. On the application, we are telling that our main page is an application shell. This is the shell. On the shell, we have another bunch of resources for the shell. So for the shell, we have the background color and everything specific. For example, if we use a tab or a tab page or a flyout, we can define all the specific resources here. We also tell if we need to have a flyout behavior for this page or stuff like that. But for this demonstration, we are only using our main page as the shell content. And to enable the navigation, I created this register route. So I'm just telling that the details page will load the details page view model. So, okay, with that, I'm gonna run this on an iPhone 11, that's the one I have. Just click on run. Will take some time because, as I mentioned it, this code will be ahead of time compiled. So everything is being compiled into native ARM code, so it can be deployed into the iPhone. And should open also the emulator. Here's the emulator. And here's an application. That's a splash screen. Still loading everything. And here is our main page. So I'm gonna try to do some hot reload stuff and see if that helps. So for this page, I created a grid layout, and it's just 2 columns and at least 1 row, but it's an auto size. This will allow us to have several rows. And because there are 2 columns, I will need to, if I want this button to take the whole footer, I just need to do a column span and tell, oh yeah, it's working. Now it's not working. that's one of the sad things. This hot reload works very good when it works, but when it doesn't, well, if I need to deploy that, I will need to stop the debugging and then execute it again. The application will be loaded. But I hope this is fixed when the Visual with the next version of Visual Studio, probably 2024, something like that. Okay, it's being compiled again. So yeah, we now have our get users button taking the whole screen. I'm just gonna click on that. We have the activity indicator binded to the isBC. And well, I just loaded every user from Slack. And then we can see the navigation here. For example, this is, we have a tab gesture. Well, this simulator allows us to scroll like if we're using the device. So I'm gonna click on my user because it will display my email. And yeah, we have my name, my email, and my current status on Slack. If I want to go back, I could just click on this button or just swipe. And that's our demonstration. Do you have any questions? Is this a built-in emulator in Visual Studio? Actually, no, I had to install Xcode, and the Visual Studio installer actually installed Xamarin Android, Xamarin macOS, Xamarin iOS, Xcode, and this is provided by Xcode. So if you have a Mac, the simulator will be, this is the application, it's provided by Xcode. So. But on Windows, I'm just gonna leave this open. As you can see here, our screen. I'm just gonna run this on an Android emulator. The Android emulator is provided by Visual Studio on both Mac, Visual Studio for Mac and Visual Studio for Windows. It will also take some time putting the device or the emulated device. Then we will need to deploy the application, deploy everything, and execute. So does anyone have some questions? We can talk about while this is executed. How is the performance versus native? I haven't tested native. Well, I did this mainly. Oh, I remember there is a. I'm gonna share with you. Just need to look for that. There is a blog post on the Microsoft community where they talk about the performance and a bunch of optimization that they did. I'm gonna share it with you. Or I'm gonna share it on the Simpat channel after this talk. Okay, so the application is still being deployed. If there's any other question? We'll try to get some elevator music for the next tech talk. Yeah, she'll have probably had some J-pop because it's Wednesday. Yeah, finally, we have the application. So you can see we have the same splash, but this is displayed or is optimized for this display. It's different because the header will be handled different for each device. We have here everything top left, here is top center. And when I click on get users, I'm not sure why this is not displayed, probably because something was not installed correctly. Didn't test this Android application on Windows, should have done that. There's more cool stuff in Visual Studio for Windows, but no. We have the users, we have also the same tap gesture. You can go back using this button, or should work doing a swipe, probably not. Yeah, here is the back button here. That's one that we are using. And is this a good alternative of React Native? If you already know React Native, probably stick with that. This, as I see this, MAUI is first for the Xamarin developers, and then because of one of the component or the component, it's called Blazor Web View. This enables us to execute any Blazor application that we already have developed. So I think this will be good for developers like us with heavy web background. So if we already have a Blazor application, we can just get them running natively on the devices. But yeah, React Native probably, if you already know that, yeah, the alternatives for .NET MAUI could be Avalon UI, and the other one is called Juno Platform, Juno like one. Those are equally, they share same, how you say it? They share the same ideology of write once and run everywhere. So, and also you have the advantage of coding everything on C#. Well, you will have some time. Yeah, we can also execute that on my Mac just to see the differences between each application. So we have our iOS, our Android should be here, Timeboard. And the Mac. No, this is not the Mac application. We see that on PC screen. Yeah, I'm trying to execute this on my Mac. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, probably it's not a good idea to have two emulated devices here. So I'm going to just close the Android one. And also the iPhone one. Yeah. Here's the application on Mac. Here are the users, and we have the same functionality. Yeah. And yeah, as we talked this now, this is something that was wrote or was designed for mobile. So we'll need to work on this if you want to have it on, probably have it centered or stuff like that. We'll need to play with the UI definitions, but most of the part we have our application running on a macOS device, on an Android device, and on an iOS device. So if there is no more questions, then this will be everything. So thanks everyone for joining. Hope to start getting some projects for mobile device and stuff like that. Not necessarily on MAUI, but it will be fun creating some work for cell phones and all that stuff. So thank you all. I'm gonna stop
Thank you,
recording.
Jesus.